I have been a long-haul trucker for 15 years, and I have seen some weird things on the road, but nothing compares to what happened last Tuesday on Highway 93. I was driving through a stretch of desert where there is no cell service and no radio stations for miles. It was 3 a.m. and the silence was starting to get to me. I decided to scan the radio frequencies just to hear some static because even that felt better than the dead silence. That is when I found it. It was a clear signal on 104.9, which should have been impossible in the middle of the Nevada desert. The voice on the radio was not a DJ or a news anchor. It was a woman whispering. She was not talking to an audience, she was talking to herself. She was listing names and dates. I listened closely and my blood turned to ice when she said my mother's name followed by the date she passed away. I almost steered my rig into a ditch. I tried to change the station, but the dial would not move. It was stuck. The woman's voice started getting louder and more frantic. She started describing the inside of my truck. She mentioned the empty coffee cup in my holder and the picture of my daughter taped to the dashboard. I looked out the window, but there were no cars behind me or in front of me, just the black desert and the pale moon. Suddenly, the radio stopped whispering and a loud screeching sound filled the cabin. It sounded like metal grinding against bone. When the noise stopped, a man's voice came on. He sounded calm and professional, like he was reading a weather report. He said that I had exactly 12 miles before the road ended. I knew this highway well, and I knew the road did not end for another 100 miles. I checked my odometer. The man on the radio started counting down. 12, 11, 10. Every time he said a number, the lights on my dashboard flickered. I tried to hit the brakes, but the pedal went flat to the floor. The truck was accelerating on its own. I was going 80, then 90, then 100. The engine was screaming. I looked at the GPS, but the screen was just showing a red circle. 9, 8, 7. The man's voice was now coming from the back of my sleeper cab, not just the speakers. I was too terrified to look back. I saw a bridge ahead of me that I had never seen before. It was made of dark stone and looked ancient. The man said 6. The temperature in the truck dropped until I could see my breath. The windows started frosting over from the inside. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. 5, 4. I saw shadows standing on the side of the road. They were tall and thin with long arms that reached the ground. They were watching me pass. They did not have faces, just smooth white skin where eyes should be. 3. The man was laughing now. It was a dry, hollow laugh that made my ears bleed. 2. The bridge was right in front of me, and I realized it did not lead to the other side of the canyon. It just stopped in midair. 1. The radio went silent. The engine died. The lights went out. I was flying through the dark, and for a second I felt weightless. Then the truck hit the ground with a force that shattered the windshield. I woke up an hour later and the truck was upright on the road. Everything looked normal. No bridge, no shadows, no whispering woman. I thought it was a vivid dream or a hallucination from exhaustion. I started the engine and it hummed perfectly. I looked at the radio and it was off. I reached out to turn it on, but I stopped when I saw something on the passenger seat. It was a small handwritten note that was not there before. It said, "Stay on the road or we will bring you back." I looked in the rearview mirror and I saw a pair of pale eyes staring at me from the darkness of the sleeper cab. I did not scream. I did not move. I just kept driving. Because the man's voice came back on the radio without me even touching it. He said, "Welcome to the second half of your journey. We have been waiting for you for a very long time." The eyes in the mirror did not blink. I stared at them for what felt like hours while my hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I wanted to look back, but I knew if I turned my head, I would never be able to look away again. The man on the radio started humming a tune that I remembered from my childhood. It was a lullaby my grandmother used to sing, but the notes were all wrong. They were sharp and twisted. The air in the cab became thick with the smell of old stagnant water and rotted wood. I looked at the GPS again, and the red circle was gone. Now it just said one word in big black letters: run. I pushed the gas pedal to the floor, but the truck was not moving faster than 20 miles per hour. It felt like I was driving through invisible mud. The pale eyes in the sleeper cab began to move. I heard the sound of a zipper slowly opening. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The whispering woman came back on the radio, but this time she was screaming. She was screaming my name over and over and asking why I left her in the dark. My mother has been gone for 10 years, but that was her voice. There was no doubt about it. I looked out the side window and the desert was gone. There was only a wall of gray fog on both sides of the road. The tall, faceless figures were back, but they were closer now. They were running alongside the truck. Their long arms were scraping against the metal of my trailer, making a sound like 1,000 fingernails on a chalkboard. One of them jumped onto the side of the cab, and its long white fingers started tapping on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. It wanted me to look at it. I kept my eyes locked on the road ahead. Suddenly, the radio cut to a news report. The reporter was talking about a massive accident on Highway 93 involving a long-haul truck. He said the driver had been found dead at the wheel, but the strange thing was that the truck was completely empty. No cargo, no fuel, no engine, just a hollow shell of metal sitting in the middle of the desert. The reporter then read the name of the driver. It was my name. I looked down at my hands, and for a split second they looked transparent. I could see the steering column through my own skin. I screamed and slammed my fist against the radio. The glass shattered, but the voice did not stop. The man's voice was now laughing and saying that the countdown was not for the end of the road, but for the end of me. I realized then that I was not on Highway 93 anymore. I was somewhere else. A place between worlds where lost things go. The eyes in the sleeper cab were finally right behind my ear. I could feel a cold breath on my neck. It smelled like the grave. A voice whispered right into my ear. It said, "You missed your exit." I looked ahead and saw a bright light in the distance. It was not the sun. It was a giant radio tower glowing with a sickly green light. Thousands of trucks were circled around it like a graveyard of steel. They were all rusted and broken. I saw figures climbing out of the trucks. They were all walking toward the tower like zombies. I knew if I reached that tower, I would never come back. I pulled the emergency brake with everything I had. The truck skidded and spun in circles. The world became a blur of gray fog and white faces. I felt the truck truck tip over. I felt the glass shatter against my face. Everything went black again. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the hot sand of the Nevada desert. My truck was nowhere to be seen. I was alone. I started walking and eventually found the highway. A police car picked me up an hour later. They told me they found my truck 10 miles back. It was parked perfectly on the shoulder. The engine was running and the radio was playing a local country station. But there was one thing they couldn't explain. The interior of the cab was covered in frost. Even though it was 100 degrees outside, the seats were frozen solid. And on the dashboard, there was a small handwritten note that was not mine. It said, "We will see you on the next trip." I quit my job the next day. I don't drive at night anymore. I don't even like to listen to the radio. But sometimes when I'm sitting in my quiet house, I hear a faint whisper coming from the vents. It is a woman's voice listing names and dates. And every time I look in a mirror for a split second, I see those pale eyes staring back at me from the darkness behind my shoulder. They are still waiting. And I know eventually I will have to finish that journey. Because once you hear the midnight radio, you never really leave the road.